Hello, this is Pastor Rick, and I want to welcome you to the Sunday Forum. In preparation for this Sunday, September the 7th, we've got a controversial topic for this week. We're going to address the situation here in Florida of Alligator Alcatraz. What are the religious responses to this migration center not so far from Emmanuel Lutheran Church here in Naples? All right. We had the migration center. It was established, as many know, that weekend of the 4th of July this summer. And this center, since its inauguration, well, it's been the center of political and social controversy. We know that. And religious groups have weighed in on what is happening there in this center. There's concerns about immigration policy, the environment, and the respect for human dignity. And so we want to take a look at this center as a way of addressing what do religious communities have to say about this center itself and what it represents. And so let's take a look at what has happened. We know very recently in July, there was a delegation of some of our delegates, some of our political leaders who finally got in to visit the center in the midst of July. And although they went and had to get legal redress to go and visit the center, when they came in and saw what they saw, they came out with, well, different reports. We have to say it. Now, the center, again, which was inaugurated on July the 3rd, was meant to be a temporary solution by the governor and by our Homeland Security leaders, Kristi Noem, to take up to 3,000 persons, maybe up to 5,000, but as a temporary solution to a problem. And when these politicians visited, like I said, the Democrats had a different report than the Republicans. The Democrats, the ones that I found quotes for, were Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Maxwell Frost. They described the conditions that they saw amongst these 3,000 detainees. They described it as alarming. Calls, they felt they had up to 32 people in a cell with only 3 bathrooms to share, high temperatures, insects infested, a lack of food, adequate facilities. The air conditioning was not working. It was too hot. And there was very little respect for human rights and their use. In other words, as Debbie Wasserman Schultz said, it was horrific, vile, and deeply disturbing. Now, that's on the Democratic side, responding to that visit. On the Republican side, you get a whole different message. Here it was from Blaise Ingratria and Jay Collins, and they said that we saw that the facility was clean. We have to defend the installation and what it's trying to achieve. They did have functioning air conditioning. They have backup generators, and they felt they were acceptable conditions because it's a temporary facility. So it's like from the two political parties, 2 completely different reports of what was happening with these detainees in Alligator Alcatraz. And of course, as we know, this was promoted by our governor here in Florida, Governor DeSantis. There were even T-shirts that were sold to promote that the government was dealing directly with this issue then of detainees and migrants. So, as of this day as we're filming, I was going to say that Alligator Alcatraz was still open, but I've just seen a report from CNN that suggested that they're going to be closing down this facility very soon. And in the report, whether it's true or not, we'll know very soon, was that a local Jewish group wanted to send chaplains into this facility. And the response was, you won't need to do that because we are going to be closing down this facility very soon. There will be no one there, and we're going to be sending everyone to another detention center up north here in Florida. All right, so a lot going on here. My interest is what is the voice of religious communities, not just Christian communities, but what has been the voice from religious communities about what's happening there at Alligator Alcatraz as a symbol for the larger issue of what is happening with migrants here in the United States. We're going to have that conversation here at Emmanuel as well. What is the religious response? And we know as religious communities, we have limited expertise when it comes to immigration policy, especially national policy. But we do have some expertise when it comes to resettlement, especially Lutherans. This is one of the things that we do all over the world in a quite efficient and powerful way. And we have a voice that comes from our scriptural tradition of how we treat foreigners and how we extend hospitality. So I've been struck just by naming a few communities. First of all, the Jewish community has had a very strong response against human rights abuses there in Alligator Alcatraz. Here I'm quoting Rabbi Rachel Greengrass. She quotes Isaiah 1:17. And she says, here she's quoting Isaiah, "Learn to do good, seek justice, reassure the oppressed, defend the orphan, and plead for the widow." That's coming from Isaiah. And so for her, she says, justice in Judaism has never meant simply following the rules. It means daring to imagine a world more aligned with God's compassion. To show leadership now means saying the detention center, this camp, does not reflect the values we aspire to as Jews or as Americans, as human beings created in God's image. Quite a strong statement. Roman Catholics, we know the Pope has already spoken to our president, President Trump, about immigration policy and the Catholic stance. So he's been critical of the United States. But Roman Catholics here in Florida have really wanted to send chaplains into Alligator Alcatraz, saying migrants, even those in detention centers, have religious rights. And they have been prevented from sending chaplains here into this very isolated facility in the Everglades. And so the Knights on Bikes, that's what they're called. They're Knights of Columbus, got together and tried to get into the detention center on their bikes and pretty much advocated to say, let us as the Catholic community provide ministry and chaplains to this facility. And as we know, that just has not been allowed. The Baptists, a little bit different. And I found a very good quote from the Danbury Institute in Dallas, Texas. This is Southern Baptist territory. And here, Miss Coulter is quoted as saying this: "Our laws must be respected and enforced." So she starts out by saying, as Christians, we should promote law and order. She said, "Nevertheless, Christians can love all people they encounter and work to share the good news with them." So in other words, first law and order, that's one message, but the other message is treat people with dignity. UCC, United Church of Christ, one pastor said, very prominent here in Florida, "It shouldn't need to be said, but," and here's his quote, "Alligator Alcatraz is in opposition to the teachings of Jesus." Now, the ELCA never comes out with positions directly, or not often, but our Bishop Suarez, has sent out all this information of how to contact your local representatives, and they've sent out a lot of information about migration and the Lutheran commitment. Because as one of the churches in the world with the strongest commitment to helping migrants and refugees, the Lutherans, we've always weighed in on these matters. Not necessarily to determine immigration policy, but how do we help the stranger? How can we be present? Because Scripture is pretty clear. On this Scripture, Old Testament and New Testament always encourages us to love the neighbor, the foreigner. Jesus with the Samaritans and the Sidonians. But we pick up these wonderful texts from Leviticus and Deuteronomy as well. Deuteronomy 10, 18, and 19. "When a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native son. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt. I am the Lord your God. All right, so that's what we want to talk about now in the Sunday Forum. What is our immigration policy? And more importantly, how do religious people, what do we have to offer to the conversation? We might be Democrats or Republicans and have certain commitments for policies, but now as Christians, in addition to political stance, as Christians, what do we bring to the conversation in loving the neighbor? Join us after the worship service on Sunday at 10:15 for this very important conversation. And thanks for joining us on the Sunday Forum. Bye-bye now.